Smoke filled the skies of Earth while the cries of the broken echoed through the hollowed remains of once great cities. The blue planet that once glowed with life now stood dark under the shadow of metal warships. Towering alien vessels drifted above like gods looking down upon ants. The Velari alliance had come with promises of peace, but beneath that lie was cold fire and merciless judgment. One by one, they brought down Earth's defense grids without warning. Satellite weapons failed to fire. Air bases fell silent. The oceans gave no safety as fleets were swallowed whole. In less than 72 hours, the world governments surrendered. Not because they lacked courage, but because the alternative was complete extinction. Still, the surrender brought no mercy. Velari foot soldiers marched through the capitals with armor that pulsed with alien energy and faces covered by dark glass. Humanity watched helpless as every leader who had stood for Earth was captured. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and diplomats were lined up in chains and taken to a floating stage. Above New Geneva, where the world once gathered for peace, was no trial, no last words, no recognition of their sacrifice. The broadcast began with a simple phrase spoken in the cold alien tongue of the Velari high voice, echoing across every screen and communication link on Earth. This is the cost of resistance. Then the executions began, swift and brutal, one by one. Earth's leaders fell from the edge of the platform, their bodies dropped into the air below as the crowd watched in frozen silence. Children cried, parents held each other. Some screamed in rage, some fell to their knees. The Velari commanders laughed. Not because they hated humans, but because they believed the story had ended. In their history, when a species lost its leaders, the rest broke quickly. They believed humans would now bow without resistance, serve without question, and forget without honor. But the Velari did not understand Earth. They did not understand what slept beneath its surface, far below the ruined cities beneath frozen lands where no satellite looked, and no invader had reached. A message traveled through wires older than any nation. A voice whispered through ancient systems. The code was simple. 4 words. Initiate Protocol 0 now. No alarm sounded. No flashing lights. Just a hum deep in the bones of the Earth, while the Velari paraded through burning streets while their machines scanned for the last remnants of resistance. While the world mourned a death that seemed complete, something old began to move. In a hidden chamber carved into the stone far beneath the Antarctic ice, a single red light came alive. Then another, then hundreds. Tubes filled with dark liquid released their pressure one by one as the lids above them slid open. Inside each tube lay a figure not born in this time, not made for peace. These were not soldiers of today. They were creations from the past, kept asleep for a moment that might never come. But the moment had arrived. One of them opened his eyes. His name was not remembered by history. His file did not exist in any modern database. His face was blank. Without age, without fear. He stood in silence as the liquid drained away and the floor beneath him opened, revealing gear that looked old but pulsed with unseen energy. He stepped forward, reached for the black suit folded at his feet, and began to prepare. Screens lit up before him, showing images of Earth's fall. He watched without blinking. The executions, the burning cities, the flags torn down, the people on their knees. He watched it all. Then he reached toward a console and entered a code known only to the ancient program. Running through this buried fortress, around him others awoke. Men and women trained for extinction, not in the art of saving the world, but in ensuring it would never be forgotten. These were the Protocol 0 units. The last breath of Earth, not guided by orders or politics. Only purpose. Across the stars, the Velari command was already sending out new messages. They would divide Earth into sectors. They would mine its soil, rewrite its history, educate its children, shape its memory. But none of them noticed the silent signal that bounced from ice to sky through the cracks of space itself. None of them saw the first scout ship vanish from orbit. No explosion, no trace, no warning. It simply disappeared. The humans on Earth who had survived the invasion huddled in shadows. They waited for rescue that would not come. They waited for help from colonies long gone silent. What they did not know was that Earth was not calling for help. Earth had already answered. In a hidden control room lit by red and blue displays. The soldier who first woke looked at the others now standing beside him. They spoke no words. They had none to waste. They knew what needed to be done. Protocol 0 had only one goal. Remove all enemies of Earth, not just from its land but from the stars. Not through diplomacy, not through warnings, through total and complete silence. The war had already begun. Not the war for survival. That had been lost. This was the war for memory, for pride, for vengeance, for the right to exist without chains. And as the skies above Earth remained, covered in the black steel of the invaders, something ancient moved through space faster than light. No one knew its name, no one saw its shape. But the stars whispered. Its return. The humans had fallen. Their leaders were dead. Their cities burned. But something worse than survival had been awakened. Humanity had triggered Protocol 0. And now the galaxy would learn what Earth did when it had nothing left to lose. The stars above Earth looked the same to those watching from orbit, but something had changed beneath them. It was not visible to the naked eye, nor did any warning appear on the Valari scanners. Their warships floated proudly across Earth's sky, watching the broken world like hunters guarding a defeated beast. In their minds, the fight had ended. The humans had no leaders, no armies, no hope. Their resistance was scattered, their courage silenced. Victory seemed complete. But deep beneath the crust of the planet, in forgotten zones, buried under layers of Earth and time, something began to stir, something that did not care about victory or defeat it. It began with movement inside the Tay vaults. Long halls of dark metal hidden from even Earth's own governments, powered by old nuclear cores that still pulsed quietly in their sealed chambers. These vaults were not bunkers for survival, they were weapons in waiting. Inside them were not soldiers of nations but relics of a world that knew what true extinction looked like, and had prepared not to avoid it, but to answer it with fire. Protocol 0 was never a battle plan, it was a promise. The one who had awakened first stood in the main command center where rows of old screens now glowed with fresh energy. He watched the data flow through streams of static and faded color. He saw the invasion unfold again, city by city, system by system. He watched the executions once more, then looked away, not in sorrow but calculation. Each image was a target, each moment a reason. The others behind him did the same. Some checked their weapons, others calibrated drones that had slept alongside them for decades. There was no need for orders. Protocol 0 was not a command structure, it was a shared mission etched into their minds before they went into sleep above the ice in the outside world. The Valari had no idea what was being awakened. Their patrols scanned for heat signals, energy spikes, known military zones. But this place was older than the maps, older than any signal, and powered by systems not seen in over 100 years. The protocol zone was designed to operate outside all known networks, created in an era when fear had shaped policy more than politics. Human named Reed, who had first opened his eyes, now stepped into the armor chamber. The suit waiting for him was not smooth or shiny like Valari tech. It was built from layers of dense alloys designed to survive radiation, fire, vacuum, and war. It attached to his body piece by piece through motion sensors and embedded codes. When the final lock sealed, a quiet voice filled the helmet. Unit online. Directive confirmed. Protocol 0 active. Reed walked to the armory where a long case was already open. Inside lay a rifle that looked like it had come from another age, but once powered it hummed with hidden strength. Beside it a small drone clicked to life and floated silently. It scanned the room, then followed him, as if it had waited only for him since the day it was made. The others were already spreading out across the underground tunnels, reaching exit points, hidden beneath oceans, deserts, and mountains. Small teams began moving towards supply caches spread across continents. These were not modern dropships or high-tech labs. These were black vaults built in secret by a global agreement that was never recorded in history. The world had feared its own end, and for once it had agreed on something. Prepare for the day. Earth no longer had a flag. Far above in the Velari Fleet Command Center, one of the officers noticed something strange. A satellite had gone silent, then another. They dismissed it as damage from the final battles. No concern, Earth systems were failing anyway. Another officer noted a drop in radio signals from Sector 12. Still no concern. The humans were dying slowly, that was expected. But then a transport ship orbiting near the South Pole sent out a distress ping. No words, just the signal. By the time command tried to respond, the ship vanished. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Don Reed and his squad emerged from a frozen cave mouth under heavy snow. Their suits absorbed the cold like second skin. The drone floated above, silently scanning. He looked at the horizon where the sky glowed faintly red from distant fires. The world was bleeding, but it was still breathing. They moved without speaking, only checking maps that did not exist in any digital database. Their first target was a Velari outpost built over an old hydro plant that at the same time other Protocol Zero squads launched across the globe. In Africa, they rose from old bunkers buried under sandstorms. In Asia, they emerged from the shadows of collapsed mountains. In the oceans, they moved through deep tunnels that connected old submarine docks. They did not seek attention. They did not fight for headlines. They moved like ghosts through the world they once swore to protect, even if that world no longer knew their names. Inside the Velari outpost, guards moved slowly, confident in their control. Human workers were pushed through routines. Machines dug into earth for minerals. No one watched the southern fence where a small light blinked once, then died. No one noticed the shadow that crossed the watchtower or the silent fall of a guard who never had time to shout. Within minutes, the outpost lights flickered, then burst. As EMP rounds burst through the generators, Reed stepped into the control room, where the Velari supervisor turned in panic. He raised his alien weapon, but never pulled the trigger. The protocol unit moved faster, shot cleaner, and walked past the body without pause. He placed a device on the main console. It began to glow a dull red, then sent a signal across Earth. A beacon not for humans, but for the satellites still orbiting in secret-told defense networks came online. Not to shoot, but to watch. Cameras in the deep sky activated. Systems designed only to track threats now turned their gaze outward, not inward. They looked toward the stars. Reed stood at the edge of the cliff above the outpost, now silent. The sky above remained filled with enemy ships, but none of them knew what had just begun. The first fire had been lit. Protocol Zero had awakened. It would not bring Earth back to what it was. It would not rebuild cities or restore governments. But it would make the enemy remember it, would teach them what it meant to break a world that never forgets. Darkness no longer covered Earth as a sign of defeat. Now it was the veil behind which a storm prepared to strike. The Protocol Zero units moved across continents, not to reclaim the land, but to erase the invaders who had dared believe humanity would kneel forever. The world above remained broken, but something stronger than walls and weapons had returned. Memory, a purpose, a fire buried deep in the blood of those who once stared at the stars with hope. The Velari who sat in control towers and command centers had not yet realized that the storm had started. They saw only silence and believed it was peace. But the silence was the breath before the roar. In the mountains of the north, a mining facility operated without fear. Its Velari supervisors marched through the cold halls, overseeing machines and slaves alike. The humans were forced to dig into the stone, looking for the minerals that powered the invaders. Ships they worked without speaking. Heads bowed, hands torn from the endless labor guards, walked between them with whips that sparked with energy. One raised his hand to strike, but froze mid-swing. A soft sound had cut through the frozen wind like a whisper only he could hear. Before the guard could turn, a shadow passed behind him, and he felt no cry, no gunshot. Just the sound of armor moving like a whisper through air. Other guards turned eyes wide, confusion on their faces. Then the lights shut off one by one, panic spread. In seconds, as the silence became screams and weapons fired into the dark, not knowing where to aim, not knowing what hunted them. When the lights returned, the humans stood free. The guards gone, the control room was empty, and on every wall, written in bright red, was one phrase: Protocol Zero has arrived across the oceans. A communication ship drifted above the Pacific collecting data from outposts, relaying updates to the Velari High Command. One operator noticed something strange, a repeating echo in the signal. He tried to filter it out, but the signal grew stronger. It carried a human voice speaking slowly, clearly. This world remembers. Then the signal infected their system screens, went black, lights turned red, engines shut down, and in the final moment before silence, a name appeared on every display: Zero. Entire Velari squads began disappearing from remote areas. Patrols went out and never returned. Bases lost contact with command drones, were found shattered with no trace of what hit them. Fear crept into the ranks. Like poison, commanders argued, blaming each other. Some called it sabotage, others whispered of human retaliation, but none of them understood that this was not an army. This was something else. Protocol Zero did not fight battles, it removed threats. It struck with precision, left no survivors, and vanished. Without a trace, it moved like memory, like vengeance, like something born not of strategy but of resolve. Humans began to whisper of it across the camps and ruins of the cities. They told stories of masked figures who appeared from the smoke, struck down their captors, and vanished before dawn. Some said they saw old Earth flags raised on towers. Others spoke of drones flying through the sky, leaving behind nothing but hope and fear. Reed stood in an old train station buried beneath a collapsed mountain. He looked at the map spread before him, not digital but printed, made before the fall, each marked with red points, every location a target, every target a message. His team moved quickly around him, preparing gear, weapons, drones, recon units. They spoke in short sentences, focus sharpened by purpose, no time for waste, no room for doubt. One of the younger protocol units returned from a field run, silent, but his armor carried marks of fire and blood. He placed a small device on the table. It activated, showing footage of a Velari outpost being struck from within. The guards turned on each other's systems, broke apart from inside. Nothing was left standing. The outpost was not just destroyed, it was erased. The plan was clear. Protocol Zero would not stop at defense. It would not wait for approval. Its mission was already in motion. Remove the invaders at any cost, not through war, but through elimination, not through honor, but through memory. High above Earth, the Velari Council debated their next move. They watched the reports come in with growing concern. Their victory was becoming unstable, their forces losing contact, their outposts falling one after another. The oldest among them recalled stories of ancient human tactics, guerrilla warfare, asymmetric response tactics, built not for victory, but for pain. They dismissed it once. Now they felt the consequences. One council member suggested a full planetary purge, burn the cities, leave no survivors, end the resistance through fire. But even as he spoke, his command ship lost power and drifted toward Earth. Communication cut, engines silenced. Minutes later, the ship was seen crashing into the sea. No warning, no survivors, no weapon fired. It was as if the ship had been unmade. Fear spread like wildfire. The phrase Protocol Zero reached their ears through captured human broadcasts, old rebel signals, now carried across starwaves. They searched their archives for answers, found nothing. It was not in their language, not in their records, not even in the known military history of Earth. It was as if Earth had prepared for this moment in secret, not to survive but to punish. Back on the ground, Reed's team prepared for the next stage. A coordinated strike across 5 major Velari strongholds, targets chosen not for strategy, but for symbolism, the execution site, the central command base, the communication array, the energy relay, and the orbital uplink, each one tied to the fall of Earth, each one now marked for erasure. The protocol team did not see themselves as heroes. They were not saving humanity, they were finishing something that should never have begun. They had no leaders, no flags, no names, only code names and mission cycles. The world had moved on, but Protocol Zero had waited in silence for this moment to speak as night fell across Earth again. 5 explosions lit the sky, not of chaos, but of precision. Each strike hit its target. Each outpost fell, each signal tower burned. The Velari command scrambled trying to respond, but their systems were already infected. Maps turned against them. Locations scrambled. Drones flew in circles, lost without purpose in space. Their ships drifted with no guidance. Blind and helpless humanity had not won yet. Earth was still wounded, still scattered, but now it was no longer silent. Now it answered every blow with a strike, every insult with fire, and every act of cruelty with justice carved in steel. Protocol Zero was awake, and it was not finished. The stars that once watched Earth in silence now held whispers that spread across systems, colonies, and empires. The name of Earth had become more than a planet, it had become a storm that no one could measure, a shadow that moved through every network and memory. Across the Velari Alliance, signals broke at random. Systems failed without cause. Security lines crashed under strange code, and everywhere those who listened heard the same repeating pulse, a voice not shouting but stating with calm finality, Protocol Zero has been initiated in the high orbit of a captured Earth station. The Velari command watched the feed in silence. A council of warlords and governors stared at screens filled with confusion. Losses, red marks growing across maps. Outposts no longer responding. Ships lost without battle fleets, drifting without control. Communication relays showing old Earth code that should have been erased centuries ago. The data made no sense until someone finally spoke a name, Protocol Zero, but the name brought no answers, only more fear. As they searched their archives and found nothing, no record, no strategy, no known operation matching the code. Some believed it was an AI, others called it an ancient weapon, others suggested a surviving military leader commanding from the shadows, but none of their theories matched the facts. The attacks were too fast, too clean, too invisible. They left no patterns, no demands, no survivors, only messages carved in walls or whispered in corrupted signals. A red zero blinking against blacken the deep cold of the void above Mars. A black ship floated just outside sensor range. It had no insignia, no name. It was older than any vessel still in use. Black steel marked with time and purpose inside it. Reed stood in the center of the command chamber, surrounded by walls filled with blinking lights and mission data. His helmet sat beside him, and his face carried no emotion, only focus. He watched the feed of the most recent operation, an orbital cannon taken offline without a single shot fired. The enemy crew left unconscious, their systems burned from within. Reed turned to the others in the room, each one wearing armor, each one born from the same past, each one trained for the same purpose. None asked questions, none spoke of rest. They moved like parts of one machine, and they all understood what came next. The heart of the Velari control, the command network that ran their occupation of Earth and the surrounding colonies, hidden in deep space between relay points, protected by shields and false coordinates. This was their mind. Without it, their body would collapse. It was not just war that drove Protocol Zero. It was memory, every strike chosen to remind the Velari what they had done to Earth, every location targeted to mirror the pain they had caused, every message a reflection of the humiliation they once broadcasted to the stars. Protocol Zero had no mercy, because mercy was the first thing the Velari stripped from Earth when they executed its leaders before the eyes of its people. Among the scattered colonies now held under Velari rule, small signs began to appear, walls marked with the red circle, voices heard in the night speaking of Earth's return. Some colonies once silent now stirred with movement. Old human flags raised again, not in defiance, but in remembrance. Ships hidden for years activated and lifted into space. flying with no orders, only instinct. When asked why they moved, the answers were always the same: we are not alone anymore. Valerie. Soldiers began to hesitate. Patrols shortened, missions delayed, weapons kept always at hand, yet used rarely. Fear had found its way into their eyes. The fear of something they could not shoot, could not find, could not understand. They wore armor and flew ships, but none of it protected them from what now moved in the dark across planets, moons, and stations. In one of the central Valari command worlds far from Earth, a secret meeting was held between the highest leaders. They argued over protocol. Some wanted to retreat, others demanded retaliation. One suggested a full-scale purge of all human colonies. Another warned that such a move might only provoke more silence, more death, more shadows. None of them knew how many protocol units existed, or where they slept, or how they awoke. The truth was that Earth had hidden its rage, not in fleets or armies, but in memory. They feared that Protocol Zero might not stop at revenge. They feared it had a greater design, not just to punish, but to ensure that no enemy ever thought of conquest again. Some claimed Earth had no such power. Others pointed to the collapsing data systems, burning ships, and ghost fleets lost in space. They looked at the records and saw only one path: Protocol Zero did not seek negotiation. It was built to deliver a message: you do not destroy Earth and walk away. Back on the edge of the solar system, Reed's team prepared for the final phase. The mission was simple: reach the central command hub of the Valari transmission array and take it offline, not just to stop their coordination, but to send one final message, a broadcast across every star system, every alliance, and every throne. A signal not of words, but of memory, the truth of Earth, the truth of its fall, and the rise of its answer. The approach would not be simple. The Valari had locked the sector with every shield and ship they had. But Protocol Zero did not care for numbers. They moved with stealth and purpose, cutting through defenses not with force, but with code and precision. Reed's ship slid through dark space as other units flanked the outer regions, each one focused on disabling, not destroying. They were not building a path, they were unraveling a web inside the Valari command hub. The officers noticed the silence before they noticed the breach. Their screens began to blink, the power flickered, the security drones stopped responding, doors locked themselves, open firewalls collapsed like sand underwater, and then a single feed took over all displays, a feed showing the execution of Earth's leaders, side by side, with the fall of each Valari outpost. No words, no threats, just image after image of cause and consequence. Panic broke the command chain. Orders were lost. Officers abandoned their post, ships turned on each other in confusion, and from the edge of the chaos, the broadcast began. A voice, calm, deep, clear, spoke to the stars: this is Earth. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Protocol Zero complete. Reed watched from orbit as the command hub fell from within. He said nothing, only watched as the Valari Empire's mind cracked open and fell silent. A system built on control, now frozen in fear and failure across Earth. The skies began to clear, not from pollution or war, but from presence. The ships that once blocked the sun now turned and fled. Some self-destructed, others vanished into deep space. Their mission ended, their power broken, their illusion of control shattered. But Earth did not celebrate, it did not cheer or sing. The ground remained quiet, the city still broken, the people still healing. Yet somewhere in the silence, something changed. Earth was not conquered, it was waiting, and now the galaxy knew what it meant to make war with humanity. The stars above Earth now carried no banners, no fleets, no threat. The sky, once filled with enemy ships, now looked empty, quiet, endless. The Valari Empire had shattered, not with one battle, but with a storm of memory and fire. They had come believing Earth would fall and be forgotten, that its people would be reshaped, its history erased, its courage buried beneath steel. But they had awakened something older than fear, something stronger than armies. They had awakened the last breath of a wounded planet. And now that breath had become wind, fire, thunder, across distant worlds once held under the Valari flag. Old colonies now stood unshackled, their skies cleared, their cities no longer echoing with foreign orders. People stepped out from the shadows, Not as rebels or survivors, but as witnesses of something far greater, the return of a spirit. Thought lost a strength hidden in silence protocol. Zero had not come to liberate, it had come to remind, and in doing so, it had changed more than Earth. It had shaken the stars themselves, in the heart of Earth's old command center. Deep beneath the ice where the first signal had been sent, the lights began to dim, not from failure, but from completion systems, once glowing with energy, now powered down with calm precision. The machines had done their part, the old codes had run their course. The zero symbol that once burned bright now blinked one final time before vanishing into blackness. Reed stood in the same room where he had first awakened. His armor now marked with ash and time, his weapon quiet by his side. Around him, the last few units of Protocol Zero moved through the station, deactivating locks, closing systems, sealing files. None spoke, none celebrated. They did not need to. Their mission had been clear from the start, not to reclaim land or power, but to answer loss with action, and to leave when the message was delivered. Walked slowly through the hallway where names were once written on the walls, names of those who fell. Leaders whose lives were taken in cold broadcast, whose final moments were used as warnings. Now those names shined again, carved into new metal plates, placed with care, respect, and memory. This was not a place of war, it was a place of silence and truth. Outside the base, the snow fell gently, untouched by flame. The sky above slowly cleared, revealing the stars as they had looked before the war, pure and distant, like silent watchers across the planet. Messages began to appear from colonies and outpost, voices reaching out, not in panic or plea, but in unity. They did not ask for help, they offered it. They did not beg for guidance, they promised it. Earth had become more than a home, it had become a symbol in a small camp built from the remains of a destroyed city. A child sat by a fire, listening to an elder speak, not from books or broadcasts, but from memory. The elder spoke of the day the skies fell, the day the leaders died, and the world went dark, but also of the day when shadows came, not to destroy, but to protect, when walls were marked with symbols and invaders fled. Without a word, the child asked if those shadows were still watching, and the elders smiled and said they always were, high above the planet where the last Velari ship drifted, lost in orbit. A signal came through, not a weapon, not a threat, but a single phrase. This was not victory, this was memory. The ship shut down, silently drifting away into space, carrying the final reminder of what it had once tried to conquer. In the ruins of an old school, once crushed beneath battle, now rebuilt with quiet hands. A wall had been left untouched where the original bricks still stood on it. Someone had drawn a single red circle, no words, no name, just the mark known across the stars, a reminder not of death, but of what rises after. Reed removed his helmet, for the last time, placing it upon the console where the first command had been entered. The room grew still, the hum of machines faded, the lights dimmed one by one, and the vault that once held Protocol Zero sealed itself again, not as a prison, not as a grave, but as a memory kept safe for the day it might be needed once more. The last transmissions sent from Earth traveled farther than any before, reaching systems where Earth was only a rumor, where stories of human rage had been called myths. The transmission carried no warning, only an image, the faces of those once executed, now shining with light beside the mark of Zero, and the voice that spoke over it did not shout, it simply said, "We remembering time." New leaders rose not from thrones or power, but from ashes and purpose. They did not speak of revenge. They spoke of history, of honor, of never letting silence be mistaken for surrender. They wore no crowns, they built no palaces, they walked among the people, reminding them that peace was not weakness, that survival was not surrender, that Earth would never forget. Protocol Zero became a phrase not of fear, but of pride, whispered in quiet corners, painted on walls, remembered in songs and stories, not as destruction, but as protection. As the fire that came when the world stood alone and still chose to raise, and so Earth stood, not as a ruler, not as a weapon, but as a warning carved in memory, born from loss and written in the stars. Forever the invaders had laughed when they took the lives of Earth's leaders, but they had forgotten one truth: you can kill a voice, but You cannot silence a legacy, and from that legacy Protocol Zero was born, and in that legacy went to sleep once more waiting, not in anger, but in readiness, because Earth remembers and Earth endures the end.